Tell us about what happened during the interval, from the time you left from the time you disbanded Cold Chisel to the time you signed with Geffen.
A lot. I was very busy. I left Cold Chisel. We finished our last gigs in December 1983, and I formed a band in March 1984. Not a band. I just put together some players to start touring as a solo act. I went and did a tour of Queensland in Australia, just to try out some songs that I'd written and shown to the band. And then in about August of '84, I released Body Swerve, this album here, in Australia, which was #1 album down there. I recorded this album fairly quickly. It took me 6 weeks to mix and everything. This one here. I knew it was fairly rough, and a few funny spots on it. But I intended to fix things up. I wanted to get product out fairly quick after Cold Chisel because it was so big, and I intended to fix things up for the overseas release as well. It was so I had that out. I toured fairly extensively in Australia, and then I started concentrating on going overseas. So I lived in Germany for 3 months, where I wrote some songs with a guy called Tony Carey.
Sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, he's a solo act. He's out on MCA, I think. He's got a very good album out at the moment. He also used to play keyboards with Rainbow. And then I went to America for 3 months, where I re-sang this album and remixed it with Bob Clearmountain, and wrote and collected material to add to this for the American release, which has ended up on this album.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of your poet.
Yes. This was sort of a stepping stone to this.
コールドチゼルの曲調だった。
Sorry, stop with the razzing there because the question's a little bit long. On the compilation that was released in Japan, it was called Australia Now. We do a disc.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with it. Have various Australian acts.
No, I didn't know.
Including Cold Chisel. And has, I guess, your video of
Star Hotel, right?
Which is all about a riot that occurred in 1979 at a certain hotel, right? And the impression he got of it was sort of almost an Australian version of The Clash, that it kind of mixes that sort of action with very pent-up music.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the question. So then
そうですね、アグレッシブなね曲っていうのはやっぱりコールドチゼルの特徴だった。
Was that your basic approach to the music? Was that type of song one of the main types of Cold Chisel intended?
That was probably a classic Cold Chisel. It was that was written by Don Walker, the piano player from Cold Chisel. He wrote about things that affected young Australia, particularly. The Star Hotel was a place where it was just a small hotel, but it used to be like a haunt for out-of-work people. They used to cash the dole checks there and drink the money there. There was homosexuals, Aboriginals, all sorts of different minority groups used to hang there, and they just decided to tear it down and put a car park up, which they haven't done, I don't really think. But when the last night of the thing, because they sort of had petitions and all this to keep the hotel happening, because it was a very old building and things. And on the night when they closed it off, there was just a big riot, and it was the first time there'd ever been an actual riot in Australia. So it was the signs of unrest in the younger population of Australia. So to that degree, I suppose Cold Chisel were sort of similar to the Clash, as they were sort of they weren't sort of telling people what to do, but they were pointing out things that were wrong within the Australian society.
キーボードは彼をバンドの前に結成
直接的な影響があったのかと。
There seems to be perhaps some punkish overtones to what you were doing then. Did that have anything to do with what Cold Chisel was about?
No, it wasn't. We weren't really. We were sort of weren't really involved in like punk. To me, was more of a fashion. One thing, Cold Chisel, the reason that we lasted so long in Australia, and the reason that we had such success is because we avoided fashions like the plague. Because the fashions were coming in and out that quick. It was something, although the punk movement was probably a bit more than a fashion in as much as it was like a revolution as far as young kids went. It was particularly more suited to England than Australia. So it was something that we didn't really think we were a punk band. We were as punk as the Doors. You know what I mean?
Apparently dropped out of school at 15 and went to class to
I was wrong. I was 16.
What were you doing up until the time you joined Cold Chisel? What sort of circumstances led you to join that?
I left school. I was just working in a factory. I love that side. I was in a band that was just doing cover versions, copy band, just like very young. I was 16 and a half or something. And then I was in that band for about 3 months, and we didn't do any major gigs. We just played in a local community hall, and then I was asked to join Cold Chisel. So I joined that band and was with that for 10 years.
So how old were you when you joined Cold Chisel?
Oh, just turning 17.
Just turning 17.
Yeah.
How is it that a band as major as Cold Chisel was in Australia didn't break out of that worldwide status in the same way that many would for the next
Particularly those two bands are a lot easier to market than Cold Chisel were. In America in particular, at that stage, we'd signed a deal with Elektra Records in America, and Elektra at that point in time were having major problems with staff. All the staff really, at that stage in America was they thought to be in a record company all you had to do was take cocaine and drive a sports car. They didn't really know about selling records. So that was one problem we had. The other problem was that we had so many different styles of music and so many different influences. Like if you listen to one of our albums, it was like there was reggae and blues and jazz and all sorts of things different depending on the song, and sort of the new wave overtones as well that you said. So unless it's just very difficult to market a band like that. Normally when you present in a band, you say this is such and such, he's rock and roll, but they couldn't do that with Cold Chisel. So we were, it was very hard to pigeonhole us. The other thing too was because we'd had such success in Australia and done it all our own way. We never conformed or to what the music industry was supposed to do. Because we'd done it all our own way, we sort of got the opinion that we could do that overseas too, which is wrong. So we went into the overseas market with blinkers on. We just thought this is the way to do it. You can't tell us anything. Get out of our face, which was wrong. We should have taken in all the good points and thrown out the bad bits. So it was probably we were naive. We had naive management and a bad record company at the time.
How is it that you went about it abroad in your own way?
What?
You said you were going to go about it when you went abroad, do it your own way.
Like they just we didn't. We wouldn't let them remix. We wouldn't let them kick tracks off and pick tracks for us. It was we delivered them a product and they took it or they didn't. It was we just had a major success in Australia with East. It was like 5 times platinum. It was one of the biggest albums ever down there, and we were fairly cocky. When we were young, and it was sort of like you can't tell us that we're better than you. So it was a bit of an attitude problem from the band, and it was a lot of things really.
売り方が難しかった。だからstart to get the feeling that you wanted to pursue new ground.
It probably started about sometime in 1982. Really, I started. We were touring Europe. I think was when it first really struck home to me. and we were under pressure. You know, it was we were touring fairly well unknown, and we'd been used to being like I said in Australia, really huge. And the band was starting to fold a bit under the pressure. They didn't know, like the guitar player, who was just like one of the best guitar players in the world, you know, because he was under this pressure, wasn't playing as good. The drummer played like a load of shit, you know, and he's a great drummer. You know, and I found that I was the only one that was really trying, and I thought to myself, you know, like this is a sign that, you know, things are starting to break down. And the band was still playing really good, but it was losing an edge. And you know, I thought about it, you know, a long time. You know, it's very hard to leave something that you've done for 10 years like that, and we were very close, like brothers. So it was something, you know, like I thought about it, and finally I just had to, you know, I thought rather than quit the band keeping going and going downhill until we ended up playing to, you know, 5 people in a club somewhere. It was, you know, because our fans were so loyal and so staunch, the right thing to do was to stop while we were still playing very well. And so we virtually, you know, broke up at the peak of our career. But it was the only thing to do because the band would have gone downhill. And plus, I also thought to myself that I'd reached a certain point, and if I wanted to improve, I had to go out and do more myself. I had to write more songs. I had to be involved more. I had to meet new players just to get the input from, you know, different musicians. Oh yeah, well I learned how to sing. You know, I had a fantastic time. We did everything you could possibly imagine in Australia. You know, we were huge. We learned how to play. We learned how to write songs. You know, we had fantastic times. You know, we just toured everywhere, drank like fish, fucked like crazy. We generally had a good time. You know. It was, you know, it was a learning process. It was something I learned how to be an entertainer in 10 years. You know, I'm a slow learner.
10年かけてエンターテイナー When it came time to remake the Body Squad there, you didn't put up the same front you had before and said, well, this is #1 in Australia. It's time to do it.
No, because I thought about that from when it happened with Cold Chisel, right through till we finished. I thought about, you know, what we did wrong. And when I was sort of shopping around in America for like a record company, I spoke to a lot of people, and I was surprised how many people knew about Cold Chisel, and they all said, yeah, it was a great band, should have broken here, but, you know, and they went through a series of things like, you know, your management was rotten, you know, your attitude was bad or whatever. So like I you know, had this, you know, sort of backlash from that, and I'd also matured quite a bit, you know, like in 5 years. So I wanted to, you know, what I wanted to do was just keep my mind open and take in everything that they gave me and try and retain what was good and throw out what was bad.
When it came time to perform solo, you pretty much had in mind the direction you wanted to take. From the time you were in Cold Chisel, did you have some idea what sort of direction you wanted to take when you went solo?
Yeah. I didn't change radically. You know, my stage show, you know, like as such, well, I haven't got much of an act really. It's more of, you know, just what I do, the way I sing. But live, my show isn't radically different from Cold Chisel. It's just there's obviously not as many influences. So I basically knew which direction I was. It wasn't as if I left Cold Chisel and went off in a completely different, you know, direction. I continued on the stream. I just refined it.
When Peter Garrett had come here quite a while, actually I guess a year or two ago.
To record?
Yeah, actually no, it was after that. He came here for No New Symbolism.
Oh yeah, what? Yeah.
And he mentioned in an interview, I think I did actually, that the band he felt the most, he could identify with the best was Cold Chisel, because he said, like his own band, you guys sort of maintained a sort of policy that was non-commercialism at heart.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of message, I guess, to your approach to things.
Yeah.
You found something in common.
There was a lot in common between the two bands. Where the difference between the two bands was Cold Chisel was more of a good time band, whereas Midnight Oil had a lot of heavy political, obviously with the anti-nuclear thing and that. But at the same time, we both had the same. We treated our audiences the same. We tried to keep prices down. We tried to do shows especially for the audiences. Keep the money down. Get the conditions better. Have better security that doesn't, guerrillas that don't, kill the audience and things like that. So both bands were concerned about their audience a lot more than the average band. Most bands over there didn't care. It would just sort of get the money and run. Whereas that's something I've continued to do as well. It's to keep looking after your audience. Number one, because they're the people that put you where you are.
I was wondering if you didn't have any worries in regard to your new career, say especially in the United States, where things tend to take a very sort of glitzy showbiz kind of turn. That's not a concern of yours, or you don't think you're going to fall into that rut?
What do you mean personally? Will I change that? They can market me, that way if they like, to polish it up and make it Las Vegas and whatever. But as far as my personal contact and once I get to the stage where I'm in control of, like once I'm doing my own shows instead of supporting and that, I'll keep the same policies.
You think the policy is basically the same then?
Oh, well, you have to look after the people that buy your records, the people that come and see you. Otherwise, eventually they're not going to come and see you. And you have to be concerned about your show. You have to do good shows every night. It's not. I hate seeing bands that get up there like I've seen Deep Purple in Australia recently, and they were one of my favourite bands. But Richie Blackmore was up there, and he could have just had a tape player. He didn't give a damn. I hate seeing that. I think you should. Once you lose that concern for your audience, you should stop playing.
Show business. Did you find that in redoing the record there that it lost any of the original edge or substance, or was that a fear of yours?
No, not really, because like if you ask most artists, generally, it's like anything you do. If you do something and then 12 months later you get an opportunity to fix things, there's always you think, oh God, it's like a heaven sent. Normally you don't get a chance to do that. Normally once you've done it, that's it. So I basically I kept the good points and got rid of the bad. I'm sure that I've spoke to the odd person in Australia who said, I liked it better when there was warts on it, but they're the real extremists. I generally tried to keep the same feel, and it was the same rhythm tracks. All I did was re-sing, and things that, because I've been singing the songs live for 12 months, I knew all these things that I think, God, why didn't I sing this? So I did it this time.
Any pressure on you to say, I wouldn't say pander, but to make it conform to, say, American taste at all?
There was pressure, but generally, like once again, I took in the finer points and threw out. Once I got too far, there was obviously when you're going to a market like that, you have to change a bit. Well, actually, when you're going to any market really outside of Australia is very unique in its earthiness. It's raw, and they like things like that. America and probably Japan and Europe, I know, like things a lot slicker. So I had to, like sound-wise, I cleaned up. Songs. There were some songs that were sort of. They sent me to write with people, like Chaz Sanford, who wrote "I Die to Be With You Tonight." I went there and he was very, very commercial, but I pushed my influence on him more, so that his song became his song, but my style. And the same with Jonathan Cain, Working Class Man. That song was originally a ballad. He was trying to write a song like a Springsteen, with rim shots all the way through. I'm on fire, like that. That's exactly what he wanted to write, and he gave it to me, and I said, "Nah, I can't do this. You're kidding me, The first time he played it to me, I went, "Oh, I hate this." So I just sat back and I thought about it, and I rearranged the song on the spot and just said, "Let's do it like this. Otherwise, we don't do it." And we did that, and it worked. And he loved it as well. And, it ended up being a great song for it. So I took in. There was heavy influence for me to change, but I took in the good bits again and forced my influence on them.
But actually, this question will take a couple ways to clear up this one. ね、そのビデオス作る感じです。
そうそう。
そのガンホーサンプラーっていう曲をやる
そうそう
やるきっかけ
そうやるきっかけやるきっかけ
How is it you ended up contributing a song to the Gun Ho soundtrack?
Basically, I finished the record, and it was released, and some people, image marketing in Los Angeles, who were doing promotion for Gung Ho, they knew that Ron Howard was looking for songs for the soundtrack, and they heard Working Class Man and said, oh, this would be perfect for his movie. Played it to him, and he said, yes, I want it, it's perfect. And he approached the record company, who approached me, and I said, yeah, I'll have to see the movie first. So I went and watched the movie with just rough songs in there that weren't the ones. And I thought it was a funny movie, and and I thought, like, if you see the movie, the song at the end looks like it was written for the movie. It's perfect. But it wasn't written specifically for it. It was an afterthought. And that gave me the opportunity to use Ron Howard as a director for my video for America, which was great fun because it was nice to work with him. He was a very nice guy.
The video for that song?
Yeah, was produced by him.
Oh, I see.
客観的にそれはやろうそうだから
Now that you've had a chance to kind of break into a market other than the Australian market, has your outlook on the Australian music scene changed very much?
Slightly. It's I still really like the basic music scene of Australia. There's a few things that I think we could learn from America. One of the things that I noticed was when I used, like, half the Body Swerve album, I used all Australian players, and it was fairly laborious with the American players because there's so many good players in that market. It's I found the competition is so fierce that all the players are just so professional. You walk into a studio and bang, they're there ready, sober, straight, ready to do the gig. In Australia, the guitar player drinks 2 dozen cans of beer before he does a session. So there's a few points that Australia could learn, but generally I like the Australian music scene as it is.
It's in your blood.
Yeah, right. I was brought up like that.
Yeah, but I mean, any other differences you want to say as a fan, as opposed to as a professional musician?
I still like the Australian music scene as a fan because, I was in LA, which is head of home of all the record companies and stuff like that, or New York or something. And you can maybe on the outside go and find 2 or 3 bands playing around the place. In Sydney, you can see 30 bands. In one night there'll be 30 bands playing or more. So it's a very healthy, and it's a club scene, which is. When I say club scene, it's not like an American club scene. It's they vary from 100 people to 2,000 people, and licensed clubs. So there's a good, healthy scene there that I like.
Colin Hay noted not too long ago that the Australian music scene kind of taken a couple of steps back because for a while it looked like things were going to start looking up, and the bands that should have made it never did. There were a lot of acts in Australia that should have busted out, should have made it on a more international scale. They never did, and it regressed for a couple of years there. What do you think?
There has been bands that should have broken, but I think it goes in waves. It goes in waves. The more bands that don't break America, the more determined the other bands get. So it has its ups and downs. I don't think the music scene has gone backwards really. It's changing all the time. The same as any music scene. Colin will tell you that himself. He's man at work now by himself. So it changes all the time. So it's. They've had problems, but the problems always come up. Like things with venues and things like that. But just things that they always get over as well. So I think the more that the good bands fail to break overseas, it makes other bands more determined.
What do you think of them having basically maintained for so long now what they were doing from the very beginning. How did they compare with, say, you? Do you see much of a comparison between them and yourself right now?
Only the same comparison as I said before, that we both think about our audiences a lot. Musically, or live musically anyway, we're similar in the fact that we're very intense, energetic rock shows. The difference is, of course, they're very political, and I'm totally apolitical. They write lyrics about their favorite lyrics are about anti-nuclear stance and political things. My favorite lyrics are wop 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 wop.
Slight difference there.
Yeah, but they're one band that I think are going to have problems breaking, and are having problems breaking anywhere else except Australia, because like a lot like Cold Chisel too, lyrically they're very, very Australian orientated. Unless you're living in Australia, unless you know the problems there, you can't really, associate. And that's one thing that happened to Cold Chisel. There was, lots of colloquialisms and whatnot. And one thing that probably has hindered Midnight Oil a lot, although since getting into the more heavy into the nuclear thing, it's obviously a lot more of a worldwide problem than just an Australian problem. But in the old days, they definitely were very Australian.
Apparently 3 producers handled that record there. Maybe you could give little critiques of each one, and also mention which one you think best suited you.
For a long time, because he was Australian, because I've worked with him for like the last 4 or 5 Cold Chisel albums, he produced them as well. So I like working. He's a personal friend. He still is a very close friend. So I like working with Mark. Chaz Sanford and Gary Gersh produced one track, which was mainly because we didn't have anybody else to do it at the time. It was Chaz wanted to do it because he wrote the song, and he's one of those guys that it's my party and I'll cry if I want to. Gary just produced it because he was there to help me. Jonathan Cain, I really enjoyed working with Jonathan Cain, mainly because he was so professional. He knew, like, we did two songs, American Heartbeat and Working Class Man, in 2 days. We walked in. He had a band together that was really hot. Tony Brock, the drummer from he was with the Babies. He's now with Rod Stewart. He had Randy Jackson, who's a bass player from Clarence Clement's band, and he also played on that whole new Aretha Franklin album. He's an excellent bass player. Dave Amato, who's a session guitar player, who is excellent. And so virtually it was easy for me. I walked in and they learnt the song. They knew the songs. And I said, right, let's do it. And bang, 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 sang it 3 times and it was finished. So it was great. So I liked working with Jonathan for that reason. I liked working with Mark for the reason that that we were close, and he had the patience to put up with me when I was struggling to get things together. Chaz and Gary were just sort of just in passing. They weren't really although Gary helped me a lot with the album, so I respected them for that. So I like them all for different reasons. And Bob Clearmountain, who engineered the thing, mixed the thing, was a pleasure to work with, because he was like all 3 of them. He was very, very into the project. He was very sympathetic to my voice. He was also like the best engineer in the world, and totally professional. So probably if I could work with any of them again, it would probably be Clearmountain, and I think he's probably going to do my next record, produce it as well as mixing. And he will produce with me.
Writing the lyrics in Cold Chisel?
I wrote maybe 1 or 2 songs an album, not much. No, I wrote a couple, the drummer wrote a couple, bass player wrote 1 or 2, guitar player wrote 1 or 2. Most of it was written by the piano player. That's one thing I liked about being a solo artist. It's put me in a position where I was under so much pressure, where I have to work. With Cold Chisel I sang, got drunk, did interviews. You know, now I'm in charge of everything. You know, I write the songs, I help produce the things. You know, I arrange them, I do the business. You know.
And then you get drunk.
Then I get drunk. Then I do more business. And I get really drunk.
Lyrics seem to refer to personal experience as opposed to anything with social leanings. This is something you had in mind from your Cold Chisel?
No, that's just something. That's the way I've always written. Like even the songs I wrote with Cold Chisel, I wrote one called "The Rising Sun." Just stole my girl away. And that was written because my wife just moved to Japan, and my girlfriend at that stage had moved to Japan, and you know, and I thought, oh geez, you know, Rising Sun just stole my girl. So I'll write a song about it. You know? So you know, You've Got Nothing I Want was written about my American record company with Cold Chisel. You know? So you know, I've always written about things very personal to me. The closest I get to being political is probably Boys Cry Out for War, which is mainly, it's not really, I'm not on a soapbox or anything here, it's just my younger days in Elizabeth in South Australia. You know, my friends tell me go and fight, and you know, what people would be telling, you know, President Reagan, you know? So, you know, I generally, you know, even there, that's fairly personal. Sat down once for an experiment, and I got Time magazine and took like one line from each page. You know, I ran it down, and I looked like a U2 song.
昔実験やったことあるんだけど、その中
It looked like awesome,ね。
じゃあ最後に
after you've broken out of the Australian market, achieved worldwide fame, what about your Australian identity do you think you'll never lose?
Oh no, I'm not, you know, no, I'm fairly set in my ways, you know, like, I think as far as an artist goes in Australia, I'll always be established as long as I deliver the goods, you know, and keep the concern for my audience, which, you know, as far as I'm concerned, once I don't deliver the goods, I'll quit. So I'll basically, you know, no matter how successful I get overseas, I'm still going to live in Australia, and I'll still, you know, keep that behind me.
No, I did.